Is it really 6?
Yes, ma'am. On the
Is that not right? Oh, there it is. That's it. Okay.
So you're
Oh, okay. Well,
gonna try
all
to
right.
help to do that.
All right. You ready?
You're calling the meeting to order and establish a quorum.
Okay.
If you want to, since you have it.
Okay, yeah. All right, good evening. It is now 6 o'clock, and we'll go ahead and call this meeting to order, and we have an established quorum, so thank you, everyone, for your attendance. The second item on our agenda is the budget workshop. So at this time, I guess we'll ask Dr. Miller to kind of kick this thing off.
Okay, thank you, Madam Chair. You have a lot of material in front of you this evening. We like to throw a lot of data at you during this budget workshop, and this is a lot of the information that we use as the administrative executive team in crafting the proposed budget as it stands today. And believe me, it's gone through multiple iterations. In fact, the summary that was sent out to you about 10 days ago has changed drastically. So we may make reference to it, but you have an updated copy that I placed there at your seat tonight. And when we start talking about the summary toward the end of the discussion, those are the updated numbers that we have. So as I kick this off, I first want to acknowledge and thank my colleagues on Executive Cabinet who are up here at the front table. These folks have put in hours and hours and hours of work trying to craft this budget, and believe me, we will continue working on it after tonight. There is nothing that is finished this evening at all, but we do want to propose to show you where we feel we stand right now, to ask for your input, your assistance, guidance, whatever, as we, over the next 2 months, put the finishing touches on the fiscal 26 budget, and we then can bring that to you at the board meeting in August for formal approval. The first topic, we're going to begin on the revenue side of the balance sheet, and let's look first of all at our tuition and fees. And
Cover these few slides
Oh,
first.
yes, okay.
We
Please
talked
do,
about it,
yes.
yeah. So I think it's important every year for us to remind ourselves, if nothing else, of how we're funded in part. And some of you, Mr. Krebs, you're new to the board. We try to remind our current board members and new ones especially about the complication of how we're funded and our three-legged stool, so to speak, of where we get our revenues that he's going to talk about in a moment. But I find this map to be very intriguing every year. I look at it and I get a little more depressed. This represents taxing districts in Texas for community colleges. So these highlighted areas are the only areas of the state that pay a tax to a community college. I think there's a misnomer even when our legislation talks about, oh, we're going to do tax release by hitting community colleges and cutting back on the funding. You're not affecting most of the state when you do that. We're not the heavy hitters. We're not the ISDs. We aren't represented in every avenue. So I think this is interesting. But I remind you, we are legislatively mandated to do that. It's coming. To do that. That shows the service areas we're required to teach and have instructional programs and sites in. And so for NCTC, what does that mean? It means we have a Cook County base. That's the main district, so that's in district. That's our tax base. Okay, I have to do something very quickly. He's not able to co-host. You can't co-host, Alex? Okay, I have to join a meeting for it to work. Just a moment. Dr. Bellows is joining us there, so let me just join the meeting, or start it, apparently. I better mute or we'll have further discourse. We good? That do it? Okay. Sorry. Technology's great, isn't it? We need every help up here. We need Alex and we need Axel in the whole room around my computer tonight. So anyway, what's important is to understand for us that North Central Texas College, our main district, our main source of revenue is strictly Cook County, with the understanding that Graham ISD has a maintenance tax. Where you see maintenance taxes in that other slide, if you see some of the like shaded areas, those are our maintenance tax districts. There's 11 others in the state. So that's a rare thing. And we're starting to see bigger districts begin to ask the question of, well, how do we do that? For example, I got a call recently from Alamo District that has this group that wants to do a maintenance tax. They've never had to do that, and they said, how do you build facilities out of district? Can you do that? And I'm like, we are experts on building things out of district. And so I said, you bet, here's how you do that. But they're not aware of that. They're not accustomed to that model. So Cook County, and then, of course, Graham pays their maintenance tax, and then Bowie has participated by providing facility in partnership, but don't have a continuing M&O tax of that. And then Denton County, largest county in the state of Texas, that does not pay a tax to a community college. Because if you look back at that original, your big metropolitan areas are paying taxes to a community college, the Houstons, the Austins, the San Antonio, the Dallas, the Fort Worth, et cetera. So I think it's just important when we start out to remind ourselves of the map, mandated by law to do that, but yet funded that way, okay? It's very humbling. And as we move forward now into the revenue, I want to make sure we, to Dr. Miller's point, this is a Q&A conversation between you as board members and our staff. So it's a workshop. Please treat it as such. Ask us along the way. Interrupt us if you have a question and go, we don't even know what this is or why is it this way. Let's treat this really like that. And so we look forward to continuing here, but wanted to kind of give you that little background history that we still don't understand totally from 1996. So, Dr. Miller.
Thank you, Dr. Wallace. The first revenue source we're going to dig into is looking at tuition and fees. And the first page is simply a historical context of what's happened over the last 5 fiscal years. This is divided into 4 sections for in-district, branch campus, out-of-district, and non-resident tuition and fees. The important thing I would bring out to you on this page is next year's tuition is flat. It's not going up. We had the opportunity back in March to bring tuition and fees to the board for vote. We decided, for many reasons, not the least of which is the fact that the governor has asked colleges and universities to not raise tuition this year. There has been some question, does that apply to community colleges or not? We decided to proceed as if it did, and we're letting others ask that question. Who knows, once we get a final result, some schools have tuition raises mid-year for the spring semester. I don't know that we've ever done that. I don't know if we want to do that, but is it an option available to us? Yes. Yes, it could be an option. So basically, your tuition level remains at 112 in district, 132 branch campus, 212 for out of district, and 317 for non-resident, which is out of state. Okay, on the next page, we try to show on the next 2 slides where NCTC stands among our colleagues across the state, all the community colleges in the state. TAC does a tuition and fee survey every year, and this is the information that was gleaned last year from last fall. So mind you, some of these schools might have gone up last spring because some schools do their increases in the spring, and we choose to do it in the fall.
And Dr. Miller, let me just say, you can't read that. If you're in the audience, we know, but we'll post this along with other things later on after the meeting tonight because it's all public information anyway. So we'll post these so people that want to see the details.
If you look at tuition and fees here at NCTC, our in-district rate of tuition ranks 18th highest in the state of Texas. There are 17 schools above us and the rest below us. Just for comparative purposes, last year we ranked 22nd. So we did go up a little bit. We had a tuition increase last year, and that's what shot us up the list from 22 to 18. If we look at out-of-district tuition, we went up there as well. Last year we went up $17 an hour, so it's really not surprising. We jumped from eighth up to fifth. And honestly, I think prior to last year, it seems like every year I gave this presentation, we've been at fifth. Last year we had finally fallen down. We weren't number 5, but we reclaimed that spot. And I think everyone agrees this is a higher rate of tuition than, on both levels, in district and out of district, than we would like to charge. But the nature of the finance system, as Dr. Wallace said, with us not being able to use property tax revenues from Denton County, essentially the only thing we have to fund the facilities in Denton County is tuition revenue. So we have to receive that revenue in the form of higher, specifically higher out-of-district tuition, and that's why we end up so high on this list.
You're going to find Dr. Miller and I bouncing back for this. It's interesting, and I think, Barbara, you've been in one of these. I get the pleasure ever so often to teach a community college management course to local level throughout the state folks on this process on a strategic finance. And one of the things we talk about in that is the shared relationship between the CEO and CFO on budgeting. It's an important, and Aspen recognizes that as a key performance indicator, et cetera. So we're going to be bouncing back and forth. I wanted to tell you why you see the others above us. Austin Community College has maintained for many, many years the notion if you don't pay in the tax, we're not going to build or serve you. So that's why they have a very large out-of-district tuition rate, because they just really don't need those students nor want to serve them, in honest. Lone Star, same way. Lone Star just simply doesn't have a large population coming from out of district because they're at maximum, and there's a higher ed partner almost on every corner. You've got Houston's, HCC, Lone Star, San Jac. I mean, there's a lot to be there. Weatherford is interesting in the sense that most of their students come from Weatherford, but also they have a Weiss County campus, and Weiss County has a maintenance tax, and the irony is their maintenance tax brings in more money than our in-district tax rate in Cook County. And so they just limit out a district because they already have a partnership pretty much between the other entities that have taxed themselves, like we have Graham. And then Ranger wouldn't exist bluntly, and there's a dear friend of mine there. He's doing a great work, their president, but they have to serve by statute Brown County, so they have an ERA campus, Stephenville, and those, if they didn't have a high rate, they couldn't have their facilities. They're same boat as we're in. And I just think it's interesting when you look at who's above us, you would think, well, why Austin? They could afford to have a lower rate. They choose to make a high rate in the Lone Star. So.
Okay. The next chart is something I wanted to bring out to you that we haven't really talked about in previous years. Waivers and exemptions are something, as I was studying some of our financial statements, I don't think we have reasonably accounted for these in the past in the budget process. And so as we get to that budget summary later on, I want to show you that we are now attempting to do that, and I think it will make our year-end numbers come in closer to where we expect them to in the future, because these waivers and exemptions are significant numbers. When we look at tuition and fee revenue is usually in the low $21 million range, and you've got almost $1 million of waivers and exemptions. That's tuition dollars we don't receive. So we need to account for those in the budgeting process, and we are trying to introduce them this year and moving forward to make sure we get a more accurate representation. What you see here is the most recent 3 completed years. We're currently in year 24, 25, and I did pull just today the current numbers up till today, but we haven't gotten through summer 2 yet. We may actually, surprisingly enough, show a slight decrease this year in those waivers and exemptions. I don't think it's going to be any higher than the 994 we had last year. It may be closer to 900,000. So in that sense, I think that bodes well for us in our year-end tuition revenue numbers. But we're going to start tracking this, and we'll be reporting on it as well. But I also thought it is a very good opportunity to show you exactly state waivers and exemptions. And I guess I'm going to get on my soapbox. I doubt there is a single thing on the waivers and exemptions that I or anyone in this room would legitimately complain about. We offer tuition exemptions or waivers to military personnel. We offer them to police officers. All worthy causes. It's just, in our view, the way the state chooses to do it, we would prefer the state to say, okay, we will pay their tuition.
Sure.
But they just tell us, okay, since this is a service member, they don't have to pay you anything. And you have to provide all the education and services for them as you would any other student. You just can't charge them. So we consider it an unfunded mandate. And as you can see, it's almost $1 million worth of unfunded mandates. I've got the list right here, and I'm not going to bore you and read all of them. We have 19 different categories of exemptions and waivers that we actually have students receiving this particular year. I went on the coordinating board's website, and there's 4 pages here of waivers and exemptions. Some of them I've never heard of, but they are legitimate waivers and exemptions that are on the books. I'm going to assume either some of them are just available to 4-year schools, or we just don't have any students that meet the criteria. So it's probably a combination of those things. But just want to make sure you realize the level of waivers and exemptions that we have here at NCTC and what it does to our financial situation. Basically, this means that the other students are having to share the burden of providing the funding for those particular students. So, like I said, if I or any of my colleagues, you hear us speaking in a derogatory fashion about waivers and exemptions, don't think for a minute as we don't think these people should obtain benefits. We just feel like the state should fund those benefits, and just instead of just turning to us as colleges and saying you can't charge them.
So when they say we can't charge them, does that only apply for students that are in our service area?
No.
Or if somebody came
No.
from Austin?
They could come from Austin with a valid waiver and exemption, and we could not charge them.
That's interesting.
And has this list of these waivers been static for a long time, or are there
No.
new things that have been added to it?
Every legislative session, there are new bills. I haven't gone in to look to see if new ones passed this time, but they're introduced every session.
You've had a exemption, for example, for military service. One of the things the state talked about but didn't add quite yet was the notion of allowing siblings and then to be exempted from tuition of a veteran. So not just their children themselves, but also their brothers and sisters. I think Dr. Bellows has a question, and I don't know if he can unmute her or if I need to. I think she's coming in. Dr. Bellows, we hear you. We're getting there.
Okay. Does a student identify their exemption? How are those exemptions identified?
Typically, the student does self-identify. I'm sure that some of our counselors, advisors, as they're talking with students, absolutely, if they realize this student is eligible, they will do everything they can to help the student. And if it's like financial aid. If they have aid available to them, absolutely, we
Well,
want to help those
and
students.
another example of that is some of those are derivatives of state reports as well, or other sources of data. For example, if we're doing free and reduced lunch, which is something we chose to do. So if you're free and reduced, now that, Mr. Grimes, is in district, kind of, I mean, within service area. If you're a high school student doing dual credit, we're waiving your tuition. If you're free and reduced, that list of free and reduced actually comes through TEA, and they verify that they're that way. So there's so many nuances. Some self-identifying, some are self-reporting, Dr. Bellows. Others are we're verifying through a listserv, et cetera. But that's a good question.
But if any of you would be interested, I do have the list. Like I said, I don't want to read through it tonight and take up the time. But it's interesting to see some of those.
Well, and one of the things we're challenged too is I think that when I speak with legislation, they often don't know that we have to book that. There's well, just waive it. Well, I can't waive it. There's an accounting principle behind that we have to book it on the other side. And that's confusing a lot of times. They're like, well, you just don't charge. I'm like, yeah, but we have to charge. Somebody has to pay for it. And so that's been a disconnect, I think, sometimes.
When is the last time this has been addressed with the state? Since it sounds like that's the angle to get the state.
Every time, yeah, the good question. Every time we have a waiver that is introduced that would affect community colleges, the TAC organization, including our legislative committee, along with the state's Board of Trustees organization, again, we try not to fight them. We're not against who's getting these. So what we provide the state is, do you know what that's going to cost us if you don't fund it? And so we push back every year to say, hey, this unfunded mandate actually is going to cost the state of Texas community colleges said millions of dollars in our budget process. So we push back on the state, but you're in a bad predicament. To Dr. Miller's point, you don't want to look like you're against these people because you know, oh, we're against veterans getting benefit. That's not it. We just want to try to figure out how do we pay for that. And so you try to be very diligent not to come off as anti the people receiving it.
And I will give the state credit, and I wouldn't be doing them right if I didn't say this. One of the biggest complaints over the years, there is a wonderful program for Texas military veterans called the Hazelwood program. There have been millions of dollars provided for ex-military personnel to attend college in Texas with Hazelwood. And just within, I'm going to say, the past 5 years, the state has finally started reimbursing us a partial reimbursement every year. We turn in a report how much we have waived or exempted for Hazelwood, and they have a bucket now of funds that they can partially reimburse schools for that. And I think that's part of the pushback that you talk about. We've been very vocal. We're very supportive of military, but we need help to try to help provide these benefits for the military. And so the state has stepped up with the Hazelwood.
Yeah.
So on the operating budget, this budget, okay. I don't think we have the actuals then.
There's a new copy of you. We're affectionately calling it Budget 3.0 because the original in your packet would have shown the surplus we had before and we'll get to that number in a moment, before the state sent us our cut. And then 2.0 had the cut but no raise, and then we were able to absorb. So you have the latest, which shows a surplus, but you will see that those waivers and exemptions, Dr. Miller, are on page 1. We're booking $750,000 to start booking that, to your point earlier.
Exactly.
And then doing that.
And Mr. Graham, I think you may have, if you'll look at that summary sheet, the very first item on there under revenue, we are starting to book and record in the budget. Yes, we do get some reimbursement from the state. That very first line, we're putting $150,000 in there that will help us with these waivers and exemptions for this next year.
What did we put in the last, like in 24, 25?
And
What did we
waivers.
get back from Hazelwood reimbursement?
Closer to, it was between 100 and 150.
Okay.
So it hasn't been over 150.
10%.
So 10%.
Yeah. Any other comments, conversation regarding tuition and fees? Okay, next we can move to everybody's favorite subject, property taxes. The first sheet is a historical update of where we stand with our appraised values. We receive initial appraised values in April. Then right now we're in the period where people can protest their valuations and all that. And we typically, the last week of July, will get the final tax rates, or excuse me, tax valuations. So those get set so that in August we can start looking at what kind of tax rates are possible for the upcoming year. Essentially, the property values in Cook County have continued to rise. The rate of the increase might have gone down some. It's about 6% this year. If you look at freeze-adjusted taxable, that's pretty much the bottom line we end up using to put with our actual tax rate to see what kind of revenue we're going to receive. So, you know, over the past, what I'm looking at, we are double where we stood in 2018. So in about 7 years, tax values have doubled for the county. And I think you'll find that's very typical across the state of Texas, especially if you're anywhere, any kind of major metropolitan area, definitely. The next slide just compares all the taxing entities within Cook County. And I must say, we've always, since I've been here, been at the very bottom of this list, but we're actually a fraction higher than the Gainesville Hospital District, North Texas Medical Center. But you can see the two of us with the hospital and the college, what either 100, 250, $500,000 value home, or the average of the county, which they now say is $321,000. It's just a comparison. Pick out the ISDs are the bulk of the property taxes that all of our residents pay. But you also have city taxes there and the overall county tax. And our tax collection compared to all those taxing entities is so much smaller.
Well, and you notice I noted under at the bottom, those don't include those new bond packages that were passed
Right.
by GISD, Callisburg, and I want to say, I think one other ISD on the list did, but I don't want to quote that. I need to check, but those are not included in those tax rates.
These are last year's rates.
Lindsay
So-
should reflect the fact that their bond is in there because they passed it within last year's budget process.
A couple of years ago.
A couple of years now, yeah. Okay.
And the next three charts are where
tiny.
we take our property tax rates and values and such and compare them to all the community colleges in the state. And this is where Dr. Wallace gets very depressed. But the first page is the tax and the valuation survey. And the value of the properties here in Cook County, if you look at net taxable value for all the, 48 of the 50 community colleges, you see that we rank 32nd. To be honest, even though Collin and Lone Star didn't report, I think it's a fairly safe assumption they're
high on the
probably in
list.
the top 5 on the page, but they're definitely above NCTC. So honestly, I would say it's accurate to say we're number 34 out of the 50.
Dr. Miller,
Yes.
that net taxable value for NCTC, how does that compare to the chart 2 back? 'Cause
Right.
Can't tie it back.
If you see the the numbers that come from the appraisal district, there's about 5 or 6 different definitions of value. They start at market value, then they have appraised value, and there are different things that get added and subtracted, and sometimes it's difficult to make comparisons because different county districts use different terminology. So we're just using the terminology that the tax survey used.
But
But that's a very good question.
on the chart showing right now, you're literally looking at the net taxable value. We would have earned our taxes on that dollar amount, correct?
I believe
On the
that's
state
correct.
one. That's how
Yes.
they figure that. There may, because there's exemptions in that.
Yep.
You know, some of the state exemptions and waivers, and Dr. Miller pointed out, there's some that exclude taxes from being collected from certain individuals. You know, so there's where you're getting your value there at the 7.5 for 24-25.
But it's the next one, M&O rate. This is where we are third from the lowest M&O rate in the state of Texas. The 6.4 cents, Blinn and Ranger are the only two colleges that have a lower property tax rate than NCTC does. So if we put Collin and Lone Star in there, that would place us 48 out of 50. And then you put those two together, the valuation, the M&O rate, and you get the third chart, which is what the actual tax levy, the tax collections. Our collections for last year were estimated to be right at $6 million. And because there are some schools with lower valuation, even though they have a higher M&O rate, their total levy still stays below us. So we rank 39th out of 48, or safe to say 41st out of 50. Okay, and the next sheet is just to show you, similar to what we showed for Cook County, this shows Graham. And I tell you, when I put this together, I was very surprised. Graham, I'm not sure what has happened, but we got preliminary tax values in April, and it showed on net taxable about a 7, maybe 8% increase, and they have come up with 3 revisions since April, which I'm not accustomed to getting revisions. It's just you have preliminary and then you have official. But each time the value seems to come down. So what the latest numbers they've given me, the net taxable value is almost identical to last year. So, yes, Dr. Walker.
No, I just remind the board, you don't set this. This is set by Graham Independent School District. That's what a maintenance note, whatever entity passes the maintenance tax, they set that. We appreciate, though, that Graham ISD is going up as high as they can. You know, their
always
intent when they did this was to stay at 5 cents. Then in 2019, they passed legislation that wouldn't allow them to do that. They could only go up to the rollback rate. So now you see, and they've been very diligent. You know, Sharice is here to testify to that. They've been diligent to say, let's go up as high as we can every year. So I do feel obligated to say thank you to that community for their continued support that way.
Absolutely. They've been very, very good to work with, definitely.
So the next part is my data that I pull for you every year that is, to Dr. Miller's point, is a little humbling. One of the things I think is important to understand, and you may tell me you don't want to see it anymore, is when you compare our collection rates, our M&O rates, and what we garner in taxes to the different categories that is set by the coordinating board in the state of Texas. So one of the first ones is considered small colleges in the state. So these are colleges that average maybe 1,200 students at most. You don't have this. This is last data. I will provide it to you in an email. But what I do is I take that and I just average it out and say, okay, based on these colleges, what's the average revenue they're receiving and what is the difference between our collection and their average, not between each individual. And so what I've done here is to say of the small colleges in the state of Texas, the Rangers, the Panolas, very small communities, the difference is they're raising $2 million on average more in taxes per year than NCTC. So the net negative there means they're raising that much more than us. You look at medium colleges, they're garnering almost $15 million a year more in local tax than we are in comparison. Those are your Cisco colleges, your College of the Mainland, your Paris. When you look at our size, so we're considered a large college. When you look at the large college, they're garnering $24 million almost more per year in tax. And then when you look at the gargantuans, they're raising $224 million a year more on average per year in tax revenue. What does that tell us? It just tells you what it is. It's just data. But it does send a clear message that in our cohort, as we're compared to the state, we are one of the lowest along with Navarro. And Navarro is similar to us in the sense that they have a county likened to Cook, and they're serving larger communities like we do with Denton. So they're a good comparable. But their rates are similar. They don't have an INS right now, but if you look at the next one I'm going to show you, it's the most humbling. You don't like to talk about competitive market, but we have peers very close to us that we really do compete on price and quality with them, and that's this group. And on average, our peer institutions in North Texas are garnering $149 million a year more in taxes, and that's why they have the lower tuition rates, and that's why they have the things that they're offer free dual credit across the entire districts. The closest that I would say we are is to Grayson, and Grayson now collects $30 million a year. Weatherford collects $27 million, and that's where we are with that collection rate. I just show you that for comparisons. Any questions? Yes.
How do we increase that?
So the options to increase that are fairly limited, honestly. There are 2 or 3 options, and it depends on what the board says is the way they want to approach it. If you want to increase, the board in the last few years, and Madam Chairman, you can speak to this if you want, has systematically said, let's go to the rollback. So that's as far as you can go up and collect a tax without going out for vote. That's a way to say, hey, we're going to do that. And y'all have done that now for probably 5 or 6, 7 years, pretty straight, 10 maybe even. There were a few years where we said it wasn't, you decided it wasn't worth it, so to speak. But the other option is to declare a rate above that, the board determined. So I'm making this up. Y'all don't quote me, but I'm making it. Let's say you said, Dr. Wallace, what's the state average for M&O rate? And we want to go out for the state average. You can do that, but you would call an election in that case to go to the voters to approve above rollback rate. The third area of which you can do is to balance the rate with GO bonds, the bonds that are paid by tax dollars, to say, okay, instead of increasing a rate, we're going to have a bond package that we do things with that is temporal, because, the old adage, taxes are forever, The fact of the matter is, if you pass the tax rate today and the Cook County said, yes, we want to be at, I'm making this up, 12 cents. We want to be where we were when we passed the bond in 11 or 14, I should. And they voted for that. It's still going to matriculate downward if you continue to have net taxable values go up. And so, we passed a 12-cent when they passed the bond, and now we've already lowered that to 9 just by virtue of new value, collecting the old rates, et cetera. So those are your bigger ways to do it, and it's a difficult task for the board to decide to do any one of those. It takes a lot of front-end research. It takes a lot to say, well, if you do a bond, where's that money going? And I would argue it takes a lot if you said we want to go up beyond a rollback. Where's that money going? What does that cover? Why would we go to the community to say, pay more taxes? We need to know where those monies would go.
Any other questions or
yeah,
discussions
the
on
the
tax
only
rates?
discussion I would say is as we move forward, this is becoming an increasing challenge to the college. When your M&O collection no longer covers your M&O for the Gainesville campus, then is a conversation that the students are paying the M&O through the tuition rate, even in Cook County, because things are just expensive now. We're looking, and we'll reference this later, Dr. Miller, I don't want to steal your thunder, but, you know, we still have some concerns about what are utilities going to cost now that we're running out of a 5-year locked-in rate. Are they going to go up? Well, of course they are, because they're going up for all of us. What does that look like? Well, your M&O should cover that under normal circumstances for your main campus. I think the last analysis you did, we were $1 million in the hole with M&O rate, correct? $1.1 million or so that we were expending more than the rate. But even
Yes, I think that's safe to
and
say.
so it could be, it fluctuates. Maybe 1 year it's 750, but it isn't covering, and that's the thing that we just want to make sure you understand. And so what we end up doing is your tuition and fees end up covering the general maintenance for what an MO rate is supposed to do.
So as we move forward next to look at state appropriation, I want to summarize. We've looked at tuition and fees where there's no increase. The only increase, we are able to generate some additional dollars into the budget because of enrollment growth. So yes, we'll collect more tuition and fees, but it's at the same rate. So as far as using that as a tool to increase revenues, that option really wasn't available to us. Property tax, as always, we have the option, as Dr. Wallace said, that rollback rate. You know, we can go up as long as we stay under an 8% increase in overall collections, then it's possible to do that there. With our total collections being $6 million, 8% is 480,000. Is that about right? So we have the opportunity or possibility to pick up about $500,000 in a $1 budget, but that's pretty much the maximum we can expect to get from property taxes.
There's one other I forgot, Mr. Krebs. There's a fourth area that you've been utilizing the past couple of years, and that's maintenance notes. And those are utilized, honestly, on current facilities. You can't build new things with those. And it's where you say, hey, we've got to catch up, for example, on HVAC. We've got HVAC issues on a particular building. So you can do those. The taxpayers do pay those. And it goes into that equation, but that's an option. But the board's also talked in the past about how often do you use those? Do you go out for voter input prior to or after? And so those are things that we can talk about even this evening. We have a good list of projects that are maintenance for this campus that the tax maintenance notes could be utilized. And again, we can't use any of those on Denton County, Bowie, or Graham campuses. We cannot use a maintenance note on any of those. And so that's, it has to be centric to the Cook County campus.
Okay. Moving on to state support. The first chart is I'm showing basically it's a historical look back at our state appropriations, but it's also broken down. That top level represents the old contact hour funding model. That's how we received our funding up until fiscal year 2023. And it was with 24 last year, well, 2 years back from today, that we were looking at House Bill 8 and the new performance funding model. So as you can see, if you look at compare the top line with the bottom, NCTC benefited tremendously when we moved to the performance model. Went up about $3 million that first year. We didn't know how to act. I mean, that was just so unprecedented. And then last year, they bumped us up a little more. Now, this year, the tide has turned. And now the state looks at all of our numbers, and it's telling us, well, initially, what we got first of all, about a week ago, after your numbers were printed, we got word that our appropriation next year or funding level would be cut $1.9 million. They've since revised that, and now we're looking at about 1.7. And I'm waiting for them to keep revising because, honestly, we have not been shown calculations, how they arrived at those numbers. And I know good and well the next chart is going to confuse everyone. And
I think that was your purpose.
That is the purpose of the next slide.
Well, and let me say this, we are gently asking for the real data. And Melinda, today, through our reporting department, through Kate, we should have, we hope, access to our numbers, but we have not received that. So we're getting a data set of here's your funding, and do not have from the coordinating board how we earned it. We don't know if we're down in associate degree completion or if we're down in dual credit. We don't know, and we can't evaluate effectively nor change our trajectory if we don't know. And so all 50 of us are frustrated with that right now and are working with coordinating board to say, listen, we've got to have real data. We've got to know how these metrics are created. How do we even earn these monies? Because what Dr. Miller's about to show you shows you the iteration of what we agreed to and what we understood in the first biennium of this, and then where we are and trying to figure out the other. And so I preface his confusing chart ahead of that. And there you go.
And if you figure this out, let me know. On the left is the calculations that were given to us last summer. Our number from the state, $15.4 million, was comprised of all these different components. These are different performance success metrics, and it shows if we have, in the case of the first dual credit students, 513 students that receive 15 semester credit hours, then we receive $3,500 per student, or right at $1.8 million. And so it's about 10 different calculations just like that on different metrics. Those are the numbers we got, and that's how we have been funded this year. They notified us in February that some of these numbers had been based on preliminary projections, and now they had actual data. And so about half the schools were going to get a bump, and half the schools were going to get a cut. Well, they told us, you're getting a $1.1 million cut. And that's from the current year's budget that we're in right now on appropriations. And to try to soften the blow, they said, don't worry, we're not going to take it from you in this year's numbers. We'll take it from your October payment next year. So we'll get into what issues that creates in just a second. But they did show how they arrived, what calculations they used to get at that mid-year change in numbers. And we have 3 success numbers. If you look at those bright gold numbers, in 3 cases, they are still using a 3-year average instead of the most recent year's numbers. They put that in when they first started the program, thinking it would help smooth things for schools as we went to that funding model. But what obviously happened to us is we lost more enrollment than most of the community colleges did. During COVID, we went from over 10,000 to under 7,500. So we had a 25+% drop. And that drop began back in the previous year of the third year of these 3 years, back in 21 and 22. So what obviously happened in our case, they dropped a very good number from 22, back when our enrollment was much higher, and replaced it now with the new year. And if you look at those numbers, where it says we're going down in funding, I believe all but one of them, we actually went up over the previous year. But our 3-year average went down. So they're cutting our funding. And they said they would put the 1.1 off until our October payment. But then they sent word last week, we're cutting next year's funding by 1.7 million. So, you know, I'm not real good at numbers, but if they're going to take 1.1 from this year and 1.7 from next year, our funding from the state next year is down $2.8 million. And with 15 million in appropriations, that's just about a 30% cut next year in state funding. I think every one of us on this front row are so glad we put in the contingency that we put
Absolutely.
into this year's budget, and that's one reason Dr. Wallace said we better do that, because we don't know on the state funding exactly what's going to happen.
And we're even seeing a fluctuation to base tier, which you're not even seeing that on here, because the base tier was designed for those colleges that don't have the net taxable values that are high, like the Alamos or something like that. So you had like Kilgore and Cisco and South Plains and even NCTC. Blinn got base tier because their tax base is a county that is not Bryan College Station, you see. Well, they're dropping base tier, and we don't know why we're losing $200 and something thousand in base tier, because we don't know that formula to determine that. So that's been a challenge too. So, and that's part of that $1.7 million reduction.
Well, the guardrails that we have,
So I asked the question recently of our staff, actually with TAC, we're working on that. The initial guardrails were based on each individual components. So what we set originally, even when I was on the Standing Advisory Committee, we said that you shouldn't be able to garner more than 10% increase, and you shouldn't suffer any more than a 5% decrease per section. So let's just say 15 schedule hours of dual credit. Let's use that one as an example. If you were going to suffer a reduction of that, it was to be held at 5% and no more. They weren't going to punish you 18, 20% because of some nuance. Likewise, if you garnered 20% more increase, you were only going to get 10%. Well, those guardrails have appeared to disappear, because last time I did math, which is scary, but the last time I did math, if I have 5% reduction in each category, it's still the overall amount when totaled would not be less than 5%. And I mentioned that to some key stakeholders, and they went, oh, I said, because if it's more than 5, then why is it 15%? Why is it 30? If you can't have more than 5 in each category. Misty, my math, I'm trying. You know, math faculty help us. But I thought, last time I checked, 5% of the whole is the same as 5% of the individual. And so we're trying to get that answer. And so far, I have not. And so that's the concern we have is like, do you trust the math, which makes it very nerve-wracking to say here's a balanced budget? You hope, because you know, even seeing iterations in the last 2 weeks where we went from one number that I thought was going to be to a second number that was different. And so we are working with them. We know it's a new formula. We're not trying to throw the coordinating board under the bus by any stretch of the imagination. We know this is new work. But we have to have our data or we can't do anything. We can't project. We can't plan. And I don't know if you're going to speak to the recoupment. I argued that even directly with the commissioner a little. They said, well, if you're at a loss you don't want to pay back, we'll just spread it over 5 years and we'll take it over 5 years out of your funding. And I said, I can't book that accounting 5 years out. I have to book that within the year we lost the revenue. And so there were 3 or 4 of us saying, no, we have to pay it and get it off the books. We don't want 5 years out, because then let's say 4 years from now you have another little dip in your completion. You're double hit. And they said, oh, and it's like we're not sure if they want us to pay it back yet or not. I don't know. But we plan to, and that's why we did that set aside in the current year to take care of current year's 1.1 deficit. I mean, it's
We had the
complicated.
contingency in this year's budget that we have allocated 1.1. We will book it before the end of August. We don't have to pay it until October, but it is
Losses
part of
this
this year's revenue stream that we're giving back, and it will be booked this year.
I'm new to the board, so
I'm as confused as you are.
so I'm just gonna ask questions like on the,
Sure.
who at the state is deciding this to take that funding? Like who is it that, is it a committee? Is it like one person? Who does that?
So let me speak to the legislative session. So I think it's important to understand what we were before we became this. It used to be we were funded by what we affectionately called butts in seats, and I hate to use that phrase, but we were literally how long the student sat in a chair in a classroom, you were funded based on that. They didn't have to even be successful. They could get an F and still be in that, or they didn't have to complete a degree. And the state said, we're tired of funding this notion. The legislature said, we're tired of funding just being in a room. We want to fund, hey, look, they're successful. Hey, it's really hard for you to get a socioeconomically disadvantaged student through the pipeline. Let's give you extra money for that completer. And so we moved to this. There are 3 or 4 folks involved in this, and that are organizations. You have the Texas Association of Community Colleges, which we have been alongside them, which are the presidents, along with your board representation, CAT, that have been alongside to say, here's how that impacts us, this is what that means. If you do this particular funding, this is what it would do to the sector in these ways. You have the coordinating board that's been tasked, like the Texas Education Agency for K-12. They're our equivalent. They're supposed to coordinate. They aren't an agency in the sense that they don't actually make the law or the rules, but yet there is some rulemaking they're given. They are supposed to exercise what the legislation determines and say, okay, based on what the legislation says, here's your earning capability. But you also have the Legislative Budget Board involved in this, who did a less than stellar job for our industry during the session. I testified on behalf of the 50 colleges to say thank you for supplemental funding, and they said a statement that all credentials, whether they're good or bad, are funded, which is not true. And we got on a whole diatribe about floral arrangement. And floral arrangement is a program in K-12 that they're funded for, but that we're not. And so we went through that. And actually, one of the senators looked at me and said, I don't want to talk about it anymore. I'm like, well, can I clarify? He said, no, I don't want to hear it. And so I wasn't able to clarify, and we caught him afterward, and he apologized, and we went through that. But there's a lot of hands in this. It boils down, state passes, state says, here's how we're funding it. Then the coordinating board is the group that has to make it work. But we're in the middle of a session now that is saying we're spending too much, which we were worried would happen. You're outgrowing the model at a faster speed than we want, so we're going to cut. And so during this session, they cut 16 degrees from being fundable. Biology. Now, we don't have those degrees. We have an associate of science, with a pathway to biology. So what they cut funding to was a true, we say you have an Associate of Science in Biology, they're saying that degree on its own is not going to give you a job when you exit that is living wage capable just at the associate degree level. You're going to have to go on for your bachelor's or further. But that's because we earned too much. They're also cutting back this session. They voted that you can no longer earn multiple credentials beyond Cert 1, Cert OSA, Cert 1, Cert 2, and associates. You cannot give a student double associates and get funding or double certificates and get funded, because we had colleges in the state that turned in 14 completers on one student in one semester. I don't know how you do that, but they did that. So that hurts. The supplemental was guaranteed, but then they said we can't keep giving more and more funding every year based on things that aren't moving toward a living wage or transferring effectively. So there is a bucket load of people involved, and I could spend 4 hours telling you the details of how they're involved and be glad to spend time with you doing that. It's the legislature that determines all these metrics.
And politics.
Oh, yeah, I mean, yes,
Politics.
yes. I mean, I can't believe, it's hard for me to believe that if we had, well, we do, but it's not the exact degree, there are a ton of agricultural degrees that the state's no longer going to fund. And I'm sitting here going, in Texas? And I said that, I'm like, really? You're not going to fund, general ag? Because they say it doesn't lead to a sustainable living wage at the associate degree level. And those numbers are coming from 5 or 6 sources, including even some data out of Austin that doesn't make sense for the rest of the state. I mean, if you're drawing dollar and career dollars and what you earn out of Austin, that's a very different mathematic cost of living than is Cisco, Texas. So.
Okay, the
I
next
know I just
slide
made
that
that
I'm going to show you has to do with our financial aid. And there has been a tremendous growth in financial aid. Dr. Wallace, if you'll move the
I will, but I
slide.
have to do
Thanks.
something
I know,
else
I know.
technological, so
Okay.
Lord help us all. I have to share a screen real quick. Is that right? I'm taking the host away from you, Alex, so that I can share my screen, so that we're a little more involved there. That might work better. Okay. There you go. Check with her, please. So you've got federal support.
Yeah,
Dr.
federal support is the other level that I just felt like we wanted to start reporting to you. Financial aid, Pell Grant, for example, there has been tremendous growth in federal financial aid over the last 3-4 years, to be specific. And honestly, the main reason I wanted to bring this to your attention is because there's a lot of talk right now in Washington about the Pell Grant program. There is an attempt, House, Senate, one or the other, in the bill that's up there right now that wants to deny Pell Grants for any part-time students. Now, the majority of our students are part-time students, and I won't say it's not a majority, but we have a significant percentage that are receiving a Pell Grant. This number here, this would be critical if this took a substantial decrease.
And I would, Dean New, I was thinking today of a program that this would really affect. If you think about the fact that the associate degree in nursing is a pretty intense program and actually is based more on contact hour than schedule hour, we could see, and I'm just giving you an example, we could see where Pell eligibility is no longer available to a full-time nursing student in the program because the hours aren't 15, but the contact hours are huge. That is a bad place to be because they're in a professional am I correct? Okay. That's a professional example where it would really be negative for us. Disastrous. Yeah.
So I just wanted you to see the significant level of funding we receive from the federal government. Actually, if you look at tuition and fees, property tax, state appropriation, with our current level of funding proposed from the state next year, this will be the #2 source of revenue, federal government, right behind tuition and fees from students. So just wanted you to see that on the federal side. And now we want to look at the expense side of the balance sheet, and we're going to start. The main expense for any college like this is salaries. So we always spend a lot of time talking with you about salaries. And the first screen shows what the college has done over the past decade with regard to salary increases. And there was only 1 year when the college was not able to give any increase whatsoever, and that was right back at the beginning of COVID. That's when our world turned upside down. We didn't know what was going on. But for about the past 7 years, I've tried to put our salary increases next to the consumer price index for the DFW area. And my colleagues and I didn't believe the number that I pulled from the internet, but it's on the internet, so it has to be true. But the Bureau of Labor Statistics does say that March to March, annual rate of inflation in DFW was 1.4%. So, of course, CPI is made up of a lot more than eggs or bacon or milk, which, you know, some of those things have gone up tremendously. I guess there's other things that aren't going up. Hey, we kept tuition levels, so higher ed's not going up. But what you'll see there is we have proposed a 3% rate of increase for our faculty and staff, and that has been built into this latest iteration of the budget that you see in front of you is a 3% raise. And believe me, the day that we received that $1.9 million from the cut from the state, that would have been a shock to me to think we could come up with a 3% raise. But we really drilled into the budget. We made some hard decisions, and we just felt like it was something that needed to be done for the employees of the college.
That was accomplished. I'll give compliments to everyone. That was accomplished with a lot of early purchase. If you remember Dr. Miller reflecting that we had put a pretty big contingency, which is covering those state deficit or state 1.1, but there was other additional monies in there that we didn't have to spend this year. For example, the dorm payment was budgeted, if you remember. Well, we aren't making that payment yet, so we were able to use those reserves that we saved for that payment to do a lot of instructional purchase ahead of time. So labs and computer labs and furniture and you know, just numerous things that we could get in and book this year because we have to get them, receive them. So kudos to IT, to Kelly, to Dan and Robbie and all those folks that were able to get that list together quickly. Jessica, Dr. DeRoche provided a lot of input on, hey, we need these furnitures to finish out Corinth that we started last year, those things. So we early purchased a lot, and we were able to pull them then out of the budget totally as requests last year. So if you're kind of wondering, how do you find in a tight year, you know, that much money, that's how we did it.
Okay, the next few slides, we start taking a look at our instructor wages, and we're going to start with part-time and show a graph that shows what we've done in recent years. This shows the level back around the turn of the decade. We had $590 per credit hour for our instructional costs. This is both for adjunct faculty and overloads for full-time instructional staff. We've had a couple of increases since that time, but we admittedly have been flat. The last 2 years, we did not go up. So we felt like there had to be some sort of increase, and We have put a $10 an hour increase. There was unanimous agreement among cabinet that we wanted to do more. Again, the challenges that we've been faced with this time, we were able to work a $10 increase in on that. And the next 2 pages will show you why we think that we definitely need to be looking at something more.
Very quickly too, Dr. Miller, just to give insight, Faculty Senate did an exhaustive study and did their own survey, and we have representatives here tonight. If y'all have questions about that, Misty and Doug are here. One of the things that they were trying to do is become much more competitive with what I showed you earlier, which is the peer organizations, the ones that we're competing directly with, the Dallases, the Tarrants. And so, you know, they were looking at it as how do we get competitive at that level. And they had presented to Cabinet and through their work a recommendation. I mean, they were very generous in saying we would love to see a 75 per credit hour, dollar per credit hour increase. That would put us that amount closer to the Tarrants and Dallases. We did that. They've got that information. They did a good job of surveying. I have to say I do appreciate their thoughts about the adjunct population as full-time faculty themselves. And so we've looked at that, and we would love to be able to do more, to Dr. Miller's point, but we were, for each of the $10 raises, you're looking at about $70,000 per $10 raise as we sit right now. So we were trying to put that in, and we'll continue to look, while at the same time still considering, you know, the 3% raise was what we were trying to do. Had we gone to that, you know, I just wanted you to, if you have questions, or I felt that I needed to say that they had done some work on that.
You know, sorry. I just wanted to say that this is a tough year. And I think that personally, I would like to, I'm okay with the numbers that you've represented here, but until we know exactly what the state numbers are going to be, I think it's going to be really hard for us to concrete this in. All of the increases in expenses, and we have to continue to look for the cuts and all of those sort of things, because we are strapped from the income side, and we know that there's utility costs that we're concerned about. So I'm just concerned about where we sit today without knowing more from the income opportunities.
And Madam Chair, I understand exactly what you're saying. You know, it is my hope, I truly think there is some clarification that will be coming from I am hopeful, some clarification from the state, and they have overestimated the decrease in funding for us. I hope they come back, oh, we didn't catch this, we didn't catch that. We're going to have a very short list. If new revenues come in, we mentioned utilities, part-time instructor salaries, absolutely. Those are, in my view, those would be at the top 2 or 3 of things that we would look at. If we have additional revenue and we can do something, those would be places that I personally would recommend that we do.
Well, and also, that's why we do this. You're not voting on concreting it tonight, so that helps. But to clarify, what you're saying is you're uncomfortable, at least you are, Madam Chair, with saying definite 3% raise, definite increased adjunct pay until we know the revenue stream.
I don't see how we can.
Okay.
Right.
That's just me personally. Somebody else chime in if you want, but that's just me personally. I'd love to.
Sure.
If the picture looks good, great, you know?
Exactly.
Well, and one other thing I would say that we did, there is because well, you're going to get to that in a minute, the benefit thing, so I'll just wait and hold off till we get to the benefit page. Sorry.
Just real quickly, the TCCTA comparisons, this shows why we need to do something. On the part-time, our $670 per hour translates into $2,010 for a 3-hour course. And that ranks NCTC at number 32 out of 42, because there were several schools that didn't respond to this survey. And I don't know I think I looked, those down below us in the previous year's survey, 3 were higher than us and 3 were lower. But we're definitely below the midpoint on that, which we don't like to be there. And the next page, we look at full-time faculty salaries, and there we're more in the mid-range. We rank 28th out of the colleges in the state. So we do look a little better on the full-time scale as opposed to the part-time scale. Any other questions on that, or, okay? A real area of concern this year is going to be benefits, because the first chart shows you graphically the amount of benefits that are what it costs for the college to provide its employee benefits. The current year, we expect to run around $6.9 million total for benefits, and the college itself is responsible for about 60% of that, 65%. We do get assistance from the state. But one of the critical elements, and this came into our thought process about raises for employees, for the first time in 8 years, health insurance costs are going up, and it's being passed on to the employees, an 8% increase this year.
And they forecast they will also be increasing next year 8%.
Next year as well.
2 consecutive years.
So
right.
That is why we were so adamant we needed some sort of raise to prevent some of our employees from having a cut in take-home pay.
And that, to that point, if you remember, we traditionally give a raise to those that have been employed 6 months or longer. New employees. Well, we're in a year for the first time ever where a new employee taking home today, because of the benefit increase, will literally have a lesser check next year. So what we also built in this was a flat raise for those folks that isn't 3%, but it covers the differential for them. Because I just feel terrible, the thoughts of, oh, well, you're making 30-something thousand a year and you're going to take less money home. That's a hard place. So we built that in flat. That expense was actually only about $7,500 to do that for those folks. So it was a very minimal investment overall. But that is also built in here. Again, all this, to your point, Madam Chair, is subject to the ultimate decision at the end. But we wanted to be able to tell you all this evening that nobody's going home because of their benefits with less paycheck than they did last year.
And the cost of those increases are shown on the next chart. And the left side of the screen represents Health Select, which is the employee insurance program that is utilized by all but one of our employees. The state also offers a consumer-directed plan, which is basically a higher deductible plan that takes advantage of a health savings account that the employee can put their money into. A lot of private sector companies are using this type of method for their health insurance. It's offered to our employees, but we have very few. Like I said, this past year, 1, I think we're on track. We may have 2 for next year. But I just wanted to put the comparison of costs for those plans. What you have at the top is what the costs are for individual employees per month, then for employees per year. And then the bottom, the green sections, are what the costs are for the college and the state, what our contributions are on a monthly basis, and then on an annual basis.
And the state no longer, if you remember, this was 6 or 7 sessions ago, stopped funding new positions, insurance 100%, unless you had substantial enrollment growth.
Right.
And so we are paying a higher level, to your point of the 65%, higher level of the insurance than we would have 10 or 12 years ago.
10 years ago, it would have been a 50-50 split between the state and the college, but now we pick up a bigger percentage. Yes.
you say?
Yes.
Say that one more time.
Okay, so in years past, 10 years ago, it was basically a 50-50 split where the state said we're going to fund 50% of everybody's benefits, except maintenance in Cook County. Maintenance workers in Cook County are not eligible for the state match at all. We pay 100% of them out of that M&O rate. We cannot pay them out of this. They're paid out of maintenance and operation Cook County tax dollars. We're not allowed to pay maintenance and operation. And so we were 50-50 10 years ago. State decided, well, that's not fair. Y'all hire people. This was their theory. You all hire people whether you have growth or not. We're not going to keep funding them at the same level. So now it's a derivative of your enrollment growth, what they cover. And so based on our enrollment growth and how many employees we have, we're now garnering 65% rather than 50 of the benefits. So basically, it translates to someone that's a $60,000 a year, $50,000 a year employee. You have to tack on another 30% to that to know what it's really costing the college between the benefits we cover and their salary.
Could that go back to 50-50 if you got the enrollment growth to support that?
I don't know that it would ever get back to full 50-50. I mean, you'd have to have, it can definitely improve, and it could, but you'd have to probably go from 8,000 to like 15,000 students for them to do that, and not hire any new people.
Hope they're not exempt.
And hope they're not exempt, yes, I know.
That's what I was wondering. Yeah, that was my next question. What kind of enrollment growth? Like how percentage-wise?
It'd be pretty massive to get back to 50-50, but the theory we have is, that's why you see us very diligent about new positions, because it's not just a matter of, okay, we need a new position. It's a matter of, okay, that new position doesn't meet the metrics in order to have 100% state funding, so it's not a $40,000 job. It's a $40,000 plus 30% plus.
What they've done in the past is if our enrollment growth, say we're static, we didn't get any new students, but we hired 5 new faculty members. Those 5, they wouldn't help because they said it's not supported by enrollment growth. And we're now pretty much at the first time, now that our enrollment is ticking back up, now I'm interested to see when they do our appropriation this year, do we get any benefit from the fact that our enrollment has gone up? So it's my hope that now they'll start picking, but I don't know if they retroactively do that on people, or is it only if we hire new people? Because, as I'll show you in a minute, we're not planning on hiring many new people. And that's on the next page is just a summary of our employees over the past decade or so. And the main reason I like to show this is just to show you there on the, I would focus on the next to the right-hand column. That is our number of full-time employees. And ever since COVID, prior to COVID, our number of full-time employees has decreased. We have not been increasing positions. We had 1 year there where we went up 3 persons, but for the most part, we're trying to be very efficient with our use of positions and trying to utilize to the best extent possible part-time when we can.
I have a question. I
Okay,
may
sure,
not
sure.
have the data, but just looking at the faculty, the first column, fiscal year 17-18, or first row, is pretty much identical to what our employment is now. What's our difference in enrollment?
Over,
From 2017,
24, 25.
oh my goodness.
we
Yeah,
were at
we
17,
10,000.
and we were at 10,000, yeah.
And we're at about 85 now.
What it should, I can't really prove this, we'd have to go deeper with Dr. King's data probably. What it would insinuate is that we believed, and I would argue we probably weren't, but when we were 19 with 158, we may have been getting by with the number of full-time faculty at that point, probably not what we would dream is the good ratio. But because we've reduced, you've still got a good number that are able to teach a full load, and you find that load within each discipline. And instruction has done a very good job in the last 3 or 4 years of saying, okay, we have this vacancy from attrition. Do we need it in that discipline anymore, or is there a greater need in a different discipline? Let's move that position over to that. But, I mean, in the perfect world, you have 100% of your classes taught by full-time faculty. That's the perfect world. That is not the world that the state of Texas lives in by any stretch. And in most cases, you have a minimal 50%, and that's even considered a good number. You usually see colleges in Texas with 60% of their courses taught by adjuncts now.
I think you'll see, if you look at that, the first 2 years on that chart, yeah, we went from 147 to 159, finally getting to the point we felt like we were getting fully staffed for 10,000 students. And then in 2020, here comes COVID, and within 1 to 2 years, our enrollments dropped down below 7,500. So, like you said, mainly through attrition, we brought that number down.
I would also say this, just as anecdotal information for you. It seems, and we can prove this, it's not totally anecdotal, it takes a lot more to retain a student today than it did pre-COVID. I mean, it's just odd to us, and I think you've got a group of people in here that would attest that it's more instructional intervention than ever, it's more tutoring than ever, it's more counseling than ever, it's more, there's triage associated, it's recruitment, and it takes a lot more. And yet we're getting that job done. We're seeing the increase in tuition because everybody's working really hard, even without major numbers of increased employees. But it takes a lot more now than it ever has, I would argue, to get them in the door, get them registered, get them to class, get them through, and get them to come back again.
We're finally to the final section, the summary, and this is where I gave you a handout at your desk for the latest version, and I just want to quickly point out a handful of items that have changed from what you were given week before last. The most important one on the first page, the first item over there on the right, 1.9 decrease in state appropriation. That's what they initially told us our decrease was going to be. They did come back and soften it a little bit to 1.7, but I'm gonna wait until I get official word before I make official changes. But so I kept that 1.9 in there. About 2/3 of the way down the page, you see the new entry we now have this year for waivers and exemptions that we haven't had before, that we need, and we're putting it in there as a negative or a contra asset income account, so that it shows negative income for those waivers and exemptions. And the most significant changes then you'll see if you were to compare your two copies from there on out is going to be where we have full-time salaries, because in the interim we plugged in the 3% pay raise. So everywhere you have a summary of full-time salaries with it, which is going to be the last entry for each and every section there, you're going to have an increase due to that. And that brings you at the very end in this to show about a budget with a whopping surplus of $356 out of a $77 million budget. And one final point I want to make about how tight this budget is, how hard we've had to work on this budget. If you look at that very last page, you'll see that what we are proposing is a budget where expenses increase right at $4 million, from $73.4 million to $77.4. $4 million increases in expenses. And I can ask you to go to two places in that budget, and you'll see a $3.8 million increase in Pell Grants, which is a net wash for us, because that's 3.8 of revenue from the feds, it's 3.8 of expenses going out on behalf of the students. And then you also look at the 1.4 million increase in bond payments. Well, that again is pretty much a wash, because we put 1.3 million into this current year's contingency knowing we were going to have a bond payment. We've just moved it out of contingency, and now it shows up in the new budget under bond payments. So you have 3.8, 1.4, that's $5 million of increased expenses. And we actually show an increase of 4 million at the end, and that's because we've done our best to go in and find places to provide that funding. So, any questions, any comments? I've been long-winded. I apologize.
Well, and I want to, Dr. Miller's been very good about thanking all the members of everywhere about this, but we also owe him a great deal of gratitude for the work that they do and the business office does every day on this. This is hard work. One of the things that we do, and I appreciate about the board, is spending time on this. This is important. I've heard Ms. Morris more than once say, you know, we've got, as a board, you all have 2 or 3 things you're absolutely responsible for without a shadow of a doubt, and one of those is the finance and the tax base for that, and the others are, you know, hiring me. But I know we spent time on this, but I think it's really important, and what we're looking for now is guidance from you all, anything that you want to see, because we've been known to present, and you all have some plans that you want to see take place as a board. I'm reminded of, you know, different tuition ideas. I'm reminded of larger arrays. But we do want to say this. You see a very, very tight budget. And if a request comes that is too verbose, it will be a very difficult task for us to find that something would have to be cut in a way. And so anyway, we open up for conversation, questions.
Yeah, and I was going to also say that it's probably time, I know we've had some thoughts brought up by other board members of potential programs or committees, and I'll start. One thing that I'd like to see personally, and hopefully the rest of the board will agree, and I feel like I've had a conversation with Dr. Wallace about this, at the Medal of Honor Museum, definitely have a group of individuals that we put together as an advisory committee, if you will, to ensure that that facility is used for as many educational purposes that we absolutely can. It's a beautiful building. This community should be very proud of it, and I think it has great potential. We just do not want it to be a dust collector. And so I know that's, I know from the conversation I had Dr. Wallace and the curator and all of the instruction folks that they agree with that, but I just wanted to make that known, that I just think it's important that we continue to find ways to bring people here for educational purposes. We're going to put together a committee to really focus on what its use and purpose is. So, anybody else? Go ahead.
So I've been brainstorming too, as far as increasing enrollment. These are great numbers to look at. Their certificates, the amount that you get revenue, completed associate degree, things like that. Just increasing enrollment here on the Gainesville campus. Talking to a lot of community members on different ideas. One being like a soccer program. I think we got a lot of support from our community, the Gainesville High School right now. I actually took the time, did the homework, so I'm going to hand it to the board members right now. Just some statements from some local community members, and then a couple of other ideas I'll talk about in here in a minute. So this is an email from a couple of coaches and community members just on support on the program that I think would help our enrollment. We get a lot more people here at the college. So the first two pages are emails sent. And if you'd like, I could read at least the first one, or would y'all like to just read it yourself?
I think it would be good for everyone else to hear, so go ahead and read one.
Okay. Yeah, sorry.
Turn you on.
One more. Hit it again. Try it now.
Check.
There you go.
All right. Sorry, getting used to this. All right, so this is, the first one I'll read is from Coach Danny Franco. He's the high school coach. He says that adding a soccer program to NCTC would be a huge benefit for our community. As a Gainesville alumni, I didn't have many options close to home and had looked elsewhere to continue playing after high school. Now, as the coach at Gainesville, which they went to the state championship this year, I see so many talented players who could benefit from having a local opportunity to compete, study, and grow. In my 9 years of coaching at Gainesville, I've been proud to help over 15 kids continue playing at the next level. But I've also seen even more turn down those chances, not because they weren't good enough, but because of the financial issues or they just can't leave home. A soccer program here would give our kids a realistic and affordable option to continue their education and athletic careers without having to leave their support system. It would also strengthen the college and the community, creating a pathway for local student athletes. There's another from another local coach. He says to start a program at NCTC would be a leap in the right direction, not only for the college, but for the entire Gainesville community as well. It would give talented players from schools like Gainesville, Denton, and in the Metroplex region an honest opportunity to continue playing while staying close to home and getting a good education. For many of these students, an offer like this, especially with scholarship potential, could be the determining factor whether or not they go back to college. It's an opportunity to give back to the students right here in our community. You know, having a soccer team would also enhance enrollment by bringing student athletes from other parts of the area, even out of state, who may not have considered NCTC otherwise. That creates more energy on campus and more involvement in student life. On the community level, home games can attract hundreds into town over the course of a season, which equates to more traffic for local restaurants, stores, and hotels. There's also a great potential to identify with local schools and youth clubs, offering clinics, mentorship programs, and having a direct connection between NCTC and local young athletes brought up here. This wouldn't just be about starting a team, it would kickstart something bigger. It gives families another reason to stay connected with NCTC and puts Gainesville on the map as a town that's growing and looking out for its kids. The benefits would show up on the field and way beyond. So these are just a couple of statements. I agree with what they're saying. I feel like it would increase our enrollment and and the community, help out the community, put it on the map. I agree with what both these coaches have said, and kind of address some of these revenue issues that we're looking at, and get that enrollment up right here at this Gainesville campus. I think it would we'd benefit quite a bit, I believe, from this.
So I'm sure Van is our athletic director and Dr. Wallace.
So let us, I'm sorry, did you?
Soccer has always been on our short list.
It has. So let us do this. Let us bring you more of a comprehensive report prior to your final budget approval that tells you sort of where we're thinking with athletic programs in general, the revenue stream versus the scholarship stream, the timeline associated with NJCAA eligible and just intramural or just programs. Let us do a little homework. We always build, and even in this budget, is built some part-time dollars for just coaching kind of things we need. That's softball, that's baseball, that's our golf coach is actually only a part-time position. It's not a full-time anyway. So let us take what Mr. Krebs, you've provided here. Let us do a little homework, further homework, to say what does that look like. We have, it becomes a facility conversation. It becomes, once it's in JCAA eligible, we literally right now don't have housing for additional, so that's why that dorm is going to be imperative to expanding some of those. But let us bring you like a more comprehensive report in August maybe that shows where we're thinking, what programs, because
That include like facilities required?
yeah,
as far
it
as
would.
the
Yes,
field and
yes,
things like
yes,
that?
it would, yeah. Because the field, we've got some field work that's done. It's nowhere what you would call grandiose at all, but like we already know, I think you're even had talked to Van about just bringing kids on campus to practice that field using it. Honestly, same thing's going on with pickleball in the community. I mean, our tennis courts have gone crazy over pickleball. And so those are things we can bring and say, here's what facilities cost. Also, the same conversation is we've built the infrastructure and we're starting esports. Esports is another one. Esports may go in JCAA a little more quickly because there's a whole lot of scholarships that we're also finding there. So that would be a part of our report. We've talked about a couple of new athletic programs that really don't add huge dollar impacts and don't add huge numbers of students, but are meaningful for the community and that actually are better completion numbers, et cetera. So let us do that, and maybe that will give you more insight on what that cost is and it's associated. In the interim, we have opportunities, I remind everyone too, that we can go through the student service side for intramural or club sports, and Melinda's more than willing with Dr. Bunyard to say, hey, maybe we start this as a club sport right now. We did that in Corinth for years with both, I think, soccer then and even basketball, so maybe we bring that back and have that conversation. We're trying to build up, and I think Joshua's here. Is he still here? Our new residence life director is here. Congratulate him or give him condolences. We're not sure which yet. But
He's smiling.
he's smiling. And so that's part of it too, is to see how we can build the student life experience on this campus and everything. And athletics is right there hand in hand with that. So we will definitely bring that back before we have a final budget process for you all to look at. Be glad to. Yeah. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to?
Yeah, on the preliminary budget that you had given us, we're comparing budgets over budgets, it appears. Do we have the actuals, or are these the actuals presented as budgets?
I do have a listing of actuals if you wanted to see them, but yeah, this is pretty much the same chart that's been presented the last few years, and I just add a new year to it, so it is based on proposed. But the copy of the budget that Cabinet uses during the creation process, yes, we've got those actual numbers for a couple of years for comparative purposes, and I'd be happy to get that for you.
And that's a really good point, because what we do a lot of times with the proposed budget, the first thing we do at the final stages in Cabinet is look at the actuals to say, well, that's why you may see something. That's why you're seeing us try to start booking that waiver piece, because we're like, why are revenue down when we think it's going to be up, and all of a sudden at the end of the year go, well, the actual came in that we spent 900,000 or whatever that is. But yeah, we can sure get that. Sure.
I'd like to say one other thing as far as Red River Promise in promoting the college, especially since being on the board. I've found some people don't know about it. So I've been really just trying to promote for the enrollment purpose and get just getting more people to the college, just awareness. Sure. So I'm sure there's a marketing plan to really hit that.
Yeah, one of the concerns I have about not just Red River Promise, and we haven't discussed that this evening, but we will have to grapple with the undocumented student conversation. We will have to have that conversation as a board, you will. And I think there is a misnomer that the undocumented population would not affect a high school student, and on the contrary, Red River Promise will be greatly impacted if undocumented, well, we're already there. It is impacted. We have the directive from the governor. It's signed. We now have to charge out-of-state tuition to any undocumented student. That's done. The question is, what does that do to Red River? And we've already started those conversations. Barbara's here. We've talked about it. The way we wrote that, it's based on residence. So, I mean, the legal thing is they would no longer be eligible for it. And we will have to be very cognizant how we make up that difference, because the state is looking at that. There's reports that are going to be associated with it, but we're grappling with that. So yes, Red River has a fully vetted marketing plan. It continues to grow. The data we will bring to you in the fall about retention is always healthy. We're continuing to fundraise on that, and I think you've even discussed with Debbie and some others about your employers and how they can match some things. We're always looking for that. Our big hurdle is going to be what is going to occur to all our undocumented students, and that impact, and it's a national impact. It's not just Texas that's grappling with this, but definitely impacting. I would argue, we don't even know how, we don't even collect that information, ladies and gentlemen. We don't collect it. If you come and you want to apply to college in Texas, the law up to this point was you come and you apply and we'll get you into class. We don't ask for, necessarily for all these other things. So we're going to have to figure out, how do you even collect that information? How do you know they're undocumented? The same thing holds true. It's not just about undocumented. We're now required to collect data on parents, parenting students. And we're like, well, we didn't normally ask how many kids do you have, or do you have children? We're having to figure that out on our application now. So there's a lot to come. I do know one of our colleges in the state is going to sue the federal government over that new regulation for some of theirs, and is looking at litigation against the state of Texas over the undocumented, and that will affect our sector as a whole. It will draw attention, and so we are preparing, for what does that look like if it draws attention to North Central Texas College, because that's going to draw a lot of media and a lot of conversation about it. So we're looking at that, but to me, Red River falls in that same category as other scholarship, other in district versus out of district. It's those undocumented where we're going to have to really look at what does that affect and how many enrollments that is and how do we collect that. And I know it's a little off, but it will affect Red River in a big way. And it's either, the foundation and the board combined run Red River, if you want to know the truth. Red River is a scholarship program. So it's really judged based on the criteria of the foundation board. The foundation board could say, I suppose, that we're going to offer it no matter what, but then they're going to have to book, and the college would have to book out-of-district tuition expense for those students, and it would at least triple, and so then your Red River Corpus funds will drain very quickly, where right now they're going very far. Those are the questions we'll have to ask.
Do the ISDs not track some of that information?
The ISDs track limited information. I don't know, Melinda, you might be better at that, reporting on undocumented at the ISD, and you may need to borrow the mic so our audience can hear. Sorry.
For the population, is this on? I can't tell if I'm talking about. For this population that we're referring to, I just want to remind everyone, and we kind of talked about this morning, I'm not sure how the ISDs necessarily are tracking it, but the students that are really being impacted are those students that we have traditionally, at least on student affairs side of the house, called affidavit students, because they've lived here at least 3 months leading up to high school graduation. they've graduated successfully, and then they enroll in a Texas public institution and they sign an affidavit that says they've met all the criteria. Those are the students that we're really talking about. And the high schools do identify them minimally depending on the level and how long they've been in the state. But those are those students that were a part of the Noriega Act, a part of, which was the original act, and then House Bill 1403, and then, so the high school has looked at those students based on when and if they're in trajectory to actually attend college. And part of this guidance and rule over time was also that they signed the affidavit agreeing also that they would work toward gaining their permanent residency. So that's where it becomes very challenging because students are agreeing to doing all of these things, and that's why the state has historically, at least since 2001, granted in-state tuition for those students. So they're tracking them minimally, but I just want everybody to know that there's also there's other students that are undocumented that say that they're not a citizen, but that's really not the students that are being impacted right now, because these are the ones that are being, I don't know if that answers your question, Ms. Sullivan, but it is something that the high schools do because they help us, you know, with financial aid. Barbara and many, Dr. Del Rio and many others in the room, we have had TASFA nights for these students because they've been historically been eligible also for Texas financial aid, whereas they may not be federal. So high schools have been tracking them probably in the same manner that we do, depending on how they fill out their application for admission to the
There's a
college.
lot of disconnect too, to be honest with you, between illegal, undocumented, I mean, F1. There's different nuances, and I think there's an underlying theme that everyone thinks that all of that is illegal when it isn't. By law, it's not all illegal. And so we're having to work through that. This conversation's occurring across the entire state among all higher ed. We're not just, we're talking universities that are having to transform their approach to this a little differently than us. But we'll be tracking it. You'll get reporting back from us. We'll know more as the days progress. But the only reason I bring that up is I know other boards are grappling with this. You know, where we may have a smaller number that fit in that category, some of our colleges across the state have the majority of their student population in that category. Border state colleges are going to be struggling to know what to do, and it could impact their enrollment. I mean, I know I've talked to my colleague and friend at El Paso, and they're going, oh my goodness, you know, what does this mean? How do we track it? Where are we going to find that? So more to come there.
So about how many students are we concerned about?
So I hate to do this. I mean, at this point, you know, you could look at those that are enrolling in the fall so far, and if you did that, I would say you're at 50 to 60. I think at our peak, you're talking about 150 to 200 students. But
Still 1 or 2% of our.
it's an impact, and you have to ask the question, if a student's wanting to be productive in certain programs, you know, a lot of these students are drawn to a technical program where they're providing and trying to be a part of their community. It's a really hard conversation for us because we as staff, not me so much as the ones in the audience, know them by name, and see a face and go, all of a sudden, student A is going to have to double, and they're barely making ends meet now because mom and dad are being provided for by them, and they're working 3 jobs and productive. They are, unbeknownst to what we think, they do pay state tax because we don't have income taxes. So if you buy stuff at the store, you're paying a state tax. That's another misnomer. And many of them have income tax ability. They even have a special number they utilize to pay their income tax to the federal government. So there's just a lot of misreporting, and what we're trying to be is very diligent with our community to say, here's what that means, working with our ISDs, and make sure that we communicate very, very specifically to that population, here's what you can do, here's how we can or can't help in that case. It's a hard line to toe right now.
Would you like me to speak on kind of a fundraiser idea, or is
So-
that another time?
Well, I think the answer is, I know we've talked about it before, and I think that your idea is good, and because we mentioned that there might be other opportunities to raise funds, but I think in this particular case, we're probably gonna have to take that to the foundation board.
Sure.
Mainly because of the type of entity that would be partnering
Right.
in order to do that.
And Mr. Krebs, I don't know, I can't remember if you haven't talked to Debbie yet. Debbie's very open to have that conversation. We can get you in front of the board pretty quickly there. We just, all fundraising activities
Has to
for
come through.
scholarshiping have to go through the foundation for
Okay.
the purposes of the college, so.
All right.
She'll be glad to get
She
any
will be
ideas
quite
she
happy
can
to
for
see
more money.
Opportunity for money, that's right.
You bet.
Love it. Okay, anybody else? Yes.
Okay.
So, under local funds, what is the ACE other income?
ACE is our continuing ed program, and I think there's two major categories right above it for non-credit fees, community ed, and adult state funded. Some of the courses they do have the flower arranging classes, but they don't report it to we don't report it to the state for funding. But there are things like truck driving that, yeah, we get to report to the state, and we get state funded. So we have those two categories, and then the other income is just for some side income over the years. In some cases, it's been significant enough that we decided to make a separate
What we
category.
basically have there, and we can talk about Dean Plushy since she's not here and she's on vacation, right? No, that department has this notion that if we're doing a continuing ed kind of non-credit based course where you don't get state funding, your goal is minimally break even. It's a community support. We do that for the community. It's a service. But then there are some where they generate a little bit of revenue, and that's why we reflect it there, is that there are some where they make a little bit of money.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chair, you know, this will come back to the board in full for final approval as a budget in August. Between that period of time and between now and then, we are open to any conversation that individual board members have questions. Please let us know. We can go back and revisit some things. We'll have some reports now, it looks like, to bring back to you, but we're open for any. Dr. Miller would be glad to explain lines if you have questions later on.
So I guess you'll keep us updated as time goes on between now and August of any
So,
significant changes?
yeah, what I will do is, since we don't meet until
July,
August,
right.
the board, I will send you in the email follow-ups I give you regularly. If we see any kind of increase or decrease or whatever happens to state, you'll get an email from me letting you know.
Okay, that'd be good.
And that way you won't be shocked when you come in August,
Right.
whatever that might be.
Thank you.
I'm sorry. Yes, I will be out of town. Okay. So now we'll go ahead and move to the next item, which would start our regular board meeting with the citizens desiring, number 3 is the citizens desiring to address the board. At this time, do we have anybody that signed up? Okay, thank you very much. Item number 4 would be informative reports. And the first board committee report would be the executive committee, and we did meet on June 23rd. We called the meeting to order. We talked through the strategic plan. Oh, wait a minute. Yeah, okay. Strategic plan. And then we also went over our agenda as we always do. We talked about some open issues with the discussion of the House Bill 8 cleanup bills and 37 House Bill 2615. And of course, we discussed some high level of the budget. And then Dr. Wallace requested information to complete the committee assignments, and we talked through that. And then we also received the board packets for the evaluation of the CEO, which we'll be doing later in the next month or two to bring. You'll get a letter, you'll get the board evaluation, you'll get the CEO evaluation, and the letter will talk to you about the deadlines and having that returned back to Sandy. And we adjourned. All right, the next item would be the finance report. Ms. Morris.
Discuss the third quarter investment report, which we'll see on the consent agenda. We also had a budget workshop that we've gone over in great detail. We looked at the May 2025 financials. We got updates from Dr. Wallace, and we adjourned.
Okay, thank you. How about building and IT? Mr. Graham?
Yes, we did meet. We met on June 17th at 7:30 a.m. We talked about several different projects. We talked about the status of the Medal of Honor Museum and discussed some of the issues related to final completion, being the reflection pool and the art wall. And we discussed that we are below budget on this project, so good job, Robbie and team. We also discussed the tax notes that were completed this year and the ones that we still have to complete, reviewed the overall cost, and we also reviewed the sound and lighting project at the CPA that's currently underway. And we also discussed new projects if we were going to decide to do another tax note for 25-26, and discuss whether those should be proposed and asked for approval. We also discussed the new dorm project. We reviewed the potential timeline for the start of the project. Currently, we have designs and drawings submitted to the city for review with a, if approved, a start date that could be as early as September of 2025. And we also discussed, we had a discussion on the farm once before on leasing it out and what should we do with it. Should we look to sell it? Is now the right time? And we asked Merit Appraisals to give us a recommendation on the value and of the use. Will Preston had, his opinion was to maintain the lease with the expectation that land values will continue to increase. And we can have further board discussions on the value of the overall property increases. But there's really no cost to continue the current lease to the college, so their recommendation was to continue that. And then we adjourned.
Okay, thank you very much. The next one would be student success. Mr. Henderson, did we have a meeting?
Yes, we, Student Success Committee met on March 31st. Seems like a long time ago. But we discussed several various student success programs. The instructional area provided information on student success initiative being used in health science programs, which have assisted to improve pass rates, retention, job placement rates in the RN, LVN, and paramedicine program. The next one we discussed was the Student Affairs Division. Provided data on enrollment trends and access, student wellness and support services, NCTC CARES program, and student response and completion and course success rates. Results from the Student Financial Wellness Survey results. The next one we discussed was the External Affairs Division provided information on three grant programs that support student success, including the Title V Grant Pathways to Completions, the TRIO Student Support Services Grant, and the TRIO's Talent Search Program. Information was shared on emergency aid assistance and scholarships awarded. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that report. The next item is the staff reports. Dr. Miller.
I know you don't want to hear from me anymore, but I am happy to answer any questions you might have about the May financials. Just a couple of things I would draw your attention to. On the fourth page, we don't ever tend to look at the budget adjustment report, but I wanted to call to your attention, Dr. Wallace talked about us using some contingency funds to do early purchases, and you'll see that in the month of May. We had over $650,000 worth of early purchase items that otherwise would have to have been plugged into next year's budget, that we were able to pull them out. We're going to take care of them this summer while we have those contingency funds in this year's budget, and go ahead and then we can save that money from next year's budget. And the other thing I wanted to mention, and you won't find it in the May financials, but I just wanted to inform you that on June the 12th, we did receive $25 million worth of revenue bonds. And once Robbie starts building something with that, we've got the funds, but until he gets started, we'll just gather a little bit of interest and take advantage of that. Any questions about the May financials?
Nope. Okay.
Thank
you
you.
very much. All right, the next item is the Chancellor's report. Dr. Wallace.
So a bit of really good news. We need a little good news tonight, right? You may feel a little discouraged. Amen, he said. Our ADN program, as you remember, has expanded into its first cohort for Graham, and it's my understanding we have a full class ready to go starting in the fall. So congratulations to both Graham campus and the ADN program. Very proud of that. As you remember, it's going to be a kind of every 2-year approach to it, where you're not trying to do it every year, but you garner enough students to be able to do that. I know that community's thrilled for that, and I know that others will probably want it too. But thank you to them. Madam Chair, you asked for me to cover one thing in particular this evening, so I will try to do it as quickly as I can. I know we're in a little longer meeting than usual, but you asked me specifically to cover the impact that Senate Bill 37 is having on Board of Regents and trustees. And so I won't go through the fact that it also has a major impact on the Chancellor CEO role and also the Provost role, because that's a 4-page summary document in addition. But let me just highlight in several categories what this would do for Board of Regents based on our interpretation. The first category I would call governance and oversight. It emphasizes that ultimate decision-making authority and final authority over all oversight, policy, financial stewardship, and key personnel decisions now remains at the board level, and retaining power to override any hiring decision for a vice president, dean, provost, and curricular change. Part of what it does, and I said I wouldn't cover this, but now it is my responsibility to evaluate senior leadership, to include our deans, our vice chancellors, and our associate vice chancellors. So that's a major impact on my schedule, and it does clearly articulate I may not, nor may you, delegate certain of those responsibilities to others. Sorry, deans. I saw Mary's face. Oh, no. Establishing institutional goals, that is not unlike what you've already done, so that's really not new news for me as far as you defining performance goals for me and evaluating me, not new there. Second category is hiring and evaluation. You now have to do certain things. You appoint and evaluate the president, not new. You appoint the chancellor if you're a university system, not new for them, but doesn't affect us. And then you approve and deny all the following positions where it has been my responsibility in the past to approve and hire. You must approve or deny provost, associate deputy provost, vice presidents, and all deans. So from this point forward, you will be responsible when we hire a new dean of approving or denying them. That may lead, honestly, to a conversation around contract employment versus at will. I'm just going to tell you, that's a conversation now because it moves from, anyway, that'll come later. Executive Search Committee, you have to have 2 members. You cannot, a lot of colleges will hire a search firm, so you just do it all, bring it to us when you're done. That's no longer allowed, and 1 board member must serve as a chair. So in the event you want to replace me, you've got to serve on that committee, and you've got to chair that committee as well. Third category is academic oversight. You must now conduct as a board a comprehensive review of the institutional's general education curriculum at least once every 5 years and ensure the curriculum meets academic standards and prepares our students for civic, professional life and is cost-effective for the students. I don't know yet, Morris. That is a great question. You will have to work with me to develop the metrics that determines that. Sorry, I didn't mean that trite. I don't know yet. We're going to have to work on what that looks like. And I honestly think that there's going to be an ability to partner with instructional program and assessment that already exists to where you say, bring us what you're accustomed to, and you all can just become familiar with it and let it stay as it is. So I hope that's not as big a task as it may sound. Certify compliance with review requirements of the Texas Education Coordinating Board and the legislative committees which are coming to. The sixth item under academic oversight still is you must review and you reserve the right to overturn any institutional decision related to curriculum. That's always been in the hands of instruction only. Now you may do that, and you are going to be required to verify that it does not have any source of bias, equity conversation, or any kind of political viewpoint when you do that. You are going to now have to approve and deny any decision I make to consolidate or eliminate degree programs or certificates. It's more than one page, I'm sorry. Next section is faculty governance. The faculty senate is abolished as of September 1st across the entire state. There is no faculty. They will have to reconvene themselves, and now the sole authority to create a faculty senate is at the board's level. You approve the structure, the membership policy, and the continuation or discontinuation of said senate. Accountability and reporting. You will have an annual public reporting requirement to submit an annual report to the governor, the lieutenant governor, the speaker of the House, and the legislation, that's all Senate and House members, on board's decisions involving executive and academic hires. So when you hire a new dean, you will have to send a report to the governor, lieutenant governor, that list of whom you hired with an attached vita as to their credentials. All the time, whenever we hire them. So I think so. I would think they want an annual report, but we don't know that yet. This is another interesting piece. You will have to respond to any formal complaint and investigation that is created by a new office that is the Texas Higher Education Board's Office of Ombudsman. That was initially going to be a Texas hire through the coordinating board. That is now a governor appointee with Senate and House confirmation. Compliance and ombudsman investigations, you have to respond to that. You have to respond within 100 days, so that 80 days. So it may be that on occasion you will be required multiple board meetings within a given month to comply with that new policy. Shared governance oversight is our next section. Enforce shared governance. That ensures that you are operating all shared governance entities are operating as consultants, not as decision makers. I'll be blunt with you, that was a direct assault or approach on faculty senates, that they are advisory only in nature. We've known that for years. At NCTC, our senate works very much as an advisory. They fully understand that and have been a positive influence on our work in the last few years. Prevent that from being used to obstruct, though, any reform or promote ideological agendas, end of quote. Training and ethical responsibilities, you will be required training. Further training, you will complete on institutional governance, policy development, ethics, auditing budgets, FERPA, and the board's role. And you will file a sworn statement affirming the understanding of all your responsibilities after your completion of your training. So, long story short, it illustrates the board's strength and role in governance, particularly around curriculum authority, personnel decisions, and institutional accountability, with increased reporting and compliance obligations to both the public and the legislature. There is an exhausted list of what this means to faculty senates. The faculty senate will no longer be allowed to meet in private. They must post their agendas ahead, just like we post public information, and they will be required to broadcast their meetings. Likewise, I am now in control of appointing their officers, and I appoint a member as well, and the board would have to approve the way we conduct our Senate and whether they continue or how they continue. So we'll be bringing that to you in August, because all those have to be in place and ready to move by September 1. And that's one portion of Senate Bill 37.
Welcome.
Mr. Chris.
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't know that one
No.
a few months ago. And I will say this version is much better than the original version. We worked diligently to pull back, working with our legislator on that. But if you have any questions, I have emailed that. There's also, you have received a synopsis on the telework restrictions now implemented by Senate Bill 2615. And then you can also, if you'd like to look at a later date, I can provide you Dr. King and I's roles that have changed under Senate Bill 37 as well.
I just wanted to make sure that we knew, we heard it for the, well, I've heard it many times, and I know he's shared this with us, so this is not brand-new information, but it is an exhausting list of new responsibilities, and we just need to constantly be reminded of what those are, and I'm sure that the staff will prepare us well as we move forward, but there are definitely some changes coming.
And there'll be major changes to TASB and the policies associated with all this.
Christy and I were just discussing that before, that book's going to be really fun to read when it comes out. It's a big, thick book with that very few changes to it, so. Anybody else? Okay, all right. The next item on our agenda then is the consent agenda. There's items A through C. At this time, if anyone would like to remove any one of those three to be discussed independently, I'll take a motion to do that. Or otherwise, I'll take a motion to approve those as presented.
Make that motion to approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion by Christy Morris, and we have a second. Erica Sullivan. Additional discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. All right, the next item would be discussion and action items. So this is the consideration of the bookstore vendor for North Central Texas College. Robbie?
Okay, what you have before you is the consideration for the bookstore vendor for North Central Texas College. And as you know, the current vendor is, their contract is going to be terminated, and that's effective October 3rd. And so we went out for RFP for a new bookstore vendor. Received two bids, one from Follett, and we all know we've had that company in place before, and the other one from Barnes & Noble College. I did pass on the bids and all of the information that they submitted onto the textbook committee for their review. And based upon what they've sent back to me, they sent me a recommendation, or really not a recommendation, but authorization or a statement that they are okay with using Barnes & Noble College as a new bookstore vendor. So that's the vendor that we're going to recommend tonight for the new bookstore vendor for North Central Texas College.
You know, you remember that we were leaving our current vendor at the request, I would argue, of our faculty, who are very frustrated with the student interface experience and the lack of resources for them. So that started, and now we're limited on the numbers of vendors that even exist. And so that's why you're seeing Barnes & Noble. Follett now requires basically 100% of the instructional be an open access, that thing that's been our challenge. Barnes & Noble has a mixed a way of delivering textbooks, both in person and still online, et cetera. So I just want to remind you, our last bookstore sold out from us 2 weeks after we signed the contract to an international company that had never owned physical bookstores before. That really was what the problem became.
All right. Thank you for that information. So at this time, we would need a motion to approve the outsourcing of the bookstore to Barnes & Noble College. All right.
I would make that motion.
Motion made by Mr. Henderson. We have a second. Second by Aaron Krebs. Additional discussion. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Raise your right hand. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right.
I have one more minute.
Well, I'm sorry.
At your table is also update 49, it is, for your reading pleasure. We'll bring that back in August to approve, and for Mr. Krebs, I'll be glad to explain to you what all that means whenever the meeting's over. Okay?
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. We do not need to have an executive session, which is the next item on our agenda. So at this time, we'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion to adjourn? So moved by Mr. Grimes, second